Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Richardson. I'm the General Counsel, COO, Director of Government Relations for BDV Solutions. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about what our government relations team has been doing on immigration, but also we're going to talk to former USCIS Director Leon Rodriguez a little bit about the state of immigration and where he thinks things are going. So in terms of just what we do at BDV in terms of government relations, we look at helping our clients at all levels of government, whether it be issues with DOL, issues with the State Department, issues with the Department of Homeland Security. We really focus on finding ways to find solutions that both help our clients, but also move the needle in terms of immigration, because immigration is a really complex system. One thing that we've been working on for the longest time has been lobbying Congress, like everybody has been lobbying Congress about increasing the numbers. The big challenge with EB3 unskilled is that it's only 10,000. And you have a lot more people than 10,000 who are interested each year in getting it. And so getting that 10,000 cap raised has been a priority of BDV, but Facebook, Microsoft, Google, every company for the longest time. And so that's something that we've been focused on. We focused as well on stopping the fairness bill. Whatever the name of that bill was called before that, the Eagle Act, that's right, just because of the way that would hurt our clients. And so we invest a lot in trying to push the ball forward and helping individual clients, but also in trying to help us in terms of immigration. So, Leon, I think I'll start with you. What did you make of the visa bulletin and visa retrogression in general? Where do you think we're headed with those?
I think it's yet another sign of what you had started with, which is the numbers are not adequate. I think your big heading for this discussion is, where are we with immigration in the U.S. And, right now we have an administration, in particular USCIS, that is certainly trying in a number of ways to make the system more efficient. But the other thing that's going on is that I don't think there's been a point, certainly in the 10 or so years that I've been active in the immigration space, where the need for immigration as a personnel solution has been more clear and more desperate. Just tremendous underemployment pretty much in every sector of the economy. We've been in a situation where a lot of our discussion about immigration has been in the high-skilled specialty occupations. And what we're finding is actually we have similar and possibly much greater needs in other sectors of the workforce. And we're not, our immigration picture is not adequate to that. Now, that all said, one area where there is some room that remains unutilized is in the EB3 other worker space, in which BDV works. Of course, the retrogression issues there are a bit of a challenge. There's something that I do think requires some further discussion, because that, given what has been underutilization of that category for as back as I can remember, it is a little puzzling that particular category would be retrogressed in the way that it is.
Yeah, that is true. And it's surprising to me because, they always say, oh my God, we have all these people who are applying for EB3 unskilled, which is true. The numbers has gotten worse in terms of applicants, but also you have this huge backlog of old cases that are finally working their way through the pipeline as well. And so you have a combination of lots of people now, lots of people in the past, but they never meet the 10,000, right? And so that's also very frustrating, is that there are a number of years in the past where they only got 5,000 or 6,000 out, and those numbers were lost to history. And which does make me want to ask. So one thing that we get asked a lot by our clients, and in general, is what about visa recapture? For those that don't know, there's an idea floating out there that basically what we need to do is go back in time since the 1990 and recapture all the old visa numbers and do that administratively. But I think you and I have both talked to people in government who are currently in government who are kind of down on that idea. Did the idea of visa recapture come up during your time at USCIS?
It did,
Mhm,
more than once, and for more than one quarter. Because this is, just pretty much every um, immigration category could
mhm,
benefit from visa recapture, whether we're talking about family-based or employment-based. There are a number of ways in which recapture could be beneficial.
mhm,
I think the view of the legal advisors, I think, is really the big thing that's controlled here. Is the view of the legal advisors that there's really not
mhm,
um, a legal path to recapture the unused visas, and so we're in a situation either where there would need to be a reinterpretation of the law.
mhm,
Um, I'm not sure that I necessarily see the easy path to that, or there
mhm,
would need to be an actual change of law
mhm,
in order
mhm,
to turn visa recapture into a reality. One of the beauties of visa recapture, I think, even if it were to be a legislative solution, is that that would be finite. It would be based on
mhm,
whatever window of recapture. And so, to the extent
mhm,
that there's some uneasiness up in Capitol Hill to sort of expand immigration in a more permanent way,
mhm,
maybe that's a solution. Not the one that I
mhm,
would prefer. Let me perhaps add.
mhm,
I'd rather do deal with the problem that you first identified, which is the numbers we have now, or the last time they were updated was in the early 90s. They really don't
right,
reflect
where we are.
the
Yeah.
size of our country, the size of our economy, our workforce
Mhm,
needs. They're completely out of line with those.
mhm. And I assume the same analysis goes for exempting dependents too, where, I think a lot of people would love it if there was executive action on exempting dependents or visa recapture. Just have the administration say, you know what, guys, like, let's just do this just the same way we did with DACA, which you were part of the founding of DACA. Why don't they have that same kind of impetus and energy for our, not, I shouldn't say our folks, but for people who are waiting in these long lines to get their green cards approved?
Yeah, I mean, DACA's probably I mean, I know that they allude to DACA and sort of allude to the idea that a lot of sort of policy energy has gone into both creating and defending DACA, but
Mhm,
they are distinct because
mhm,
DACA, people may have forgotten this, is a temporary solution, and a very imperfect solution for its beneficiaries. We're talking about here, rightly so, is a permanent immigration to the U.S.
mhm,
Again, this is an area where the lawyers have looked at this many times and have concluded that right now, on the statutory scheme that we have, there's really not a way forward. Which means that we might be able to nibble around the edges, and I think there's been some effort, both during my time
mhm,
as director and in the current administration, to at least kind of widen the path a little bit. But in
mhm,
terms of really changing the numbers, that is a responsibility that Congress really needs to take on.
mhm. Well, I think it's, for me, just on the outside looking in, it's just frustrating that, and I don't want to badmouth the administration too much, but it seems to me that there's a lot of talk about what Congress needs to do, but what are they doing? Like, right? Like, are they calling Congress? Are they talking to individual congressmen? Or is everyone just sort of thrown their hands up and said, well, you guys take, it's like a lot of finger pointing, but not a lot of decisions and hard choices are being made. Like, right? So Biden wrote an immigration plan. That's wonderful. Trump wrote an immigration plan. Everyone writes a plan, but no one's actually trying to like implement said plan.
Yeah, I think the reality of where we are right now, I'm sure they are talking. My sense of things for a while has been that there's not been any meaningful effort to talk about comprehensive reform between the White
Mhm,
House, and when I say meaningful, that has any chance of getting to the floor and even getting a
mhm,
vote, let alone actually passing,
mhm,
between the administration and in both houses of Congress. There have been some efforts between the two houses. There have been some new players that have emerged kind of unexpectedly, advocating for reform. But
mhm,
there's two realities: is we're still very politically divided. We have very, very different views on what the contours of an immigration package
Mm-hmm.
would be in dug in, people pretty dug in certain elements in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the big thing that I think just really literally sucks all the oxygen out of the room is the Southwest border and the
Mm-hmm.
activity on the Southwest border, which has, I think, consumed, to the extent there is an immigration discussion of any moment between Congress and the administration, a lot of that's got to be focused on the Southwest border just because of
Mm-hmm.
how
Their
active the
attention.
border is, how much controversy the management of the border has generated. That's just the reality that until that's somehow quieted in some way, that's going to make it very hard for other parts of the system to be appropriately reformed.
Yeah, which is also hard because they are interconnected in one another, right? Like if you have a broken immigration system, well, I say illegal is not the word, but certainly if you have a broken immigration system, people are going to have to try to find different ways to get into the country, and it's hard to talk to our clients and explain to them that you need to literally wait all of these years to get this done. And it seems like all the attention is focused on people who aren't necessarily waiting all of those years. And that
Well,
might be not
no,
a fair assessment, but it feels that way though.
we could fill the rooms in which you and I sit right now with economists who will tell you that we have occupations in the U.S. that are where there's significant underemployment,
Hmm.
that there are skill sets coming even from the countries that are sort of making up a large portion of the migration at the Southwest U.S. border.
Hmm.
There are occupations that are well represented in those populations, and we don't have a sufficient regularized path
Right.
to admit those people into the U.S. to work. And
Right.
so instead, we've had, and I, certainly agree with what the administration has done with respect to temporary protected status for Venezuela and humanitarian parole for nationals of certain countries in the Western Hemisphere. But that's not a substitute
Right.
for real non-immigrant and immigrant options
Hmm.
for people to be coming to work in the U.S. and fill jobs that actually need to be filled in the U.S.
Right, right. Because it just feels like all, and so I guess that my second question or next question is going to be, what have you heard? What else is possibly out there too that could potentially help on the EB3 unskilled side, just in terms of what they're thinking, or what are they thinking about the employment-based immigration process, and anything out there that administratively could be done, but that they're talking about doing, or maybe that could be done, that we haven't really thought about.
Well, one of the things I think we need to look at is the role that the H-2B category in particular
Hmm.
can play in um, setting the stage for individuals to then apply for EB3 and to think about how that becomes a more viable path without people having to sort of run back and forth from their
Hmm.
home country rather,
Hmm.
and be in the U.S. to work. And so, as you know, there is a regulation that has both helpful in challenging elements with respect to the H2B and H2A categories.
Hmm.
But I think one way to sort of really help us fully utilize those categories would be to create a clearer path from the H2B category to the EB3 other
Hmm.
work category.
Yeah, I think that that's actually, yeah, that would be very, very helpful if they created something. But it just feels like there isn't a lot of there's a lot of talk in Congress, a lot of talk in the White House, but there ain't much in the way of leadership and people willing to make any sacrifices, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that's and then the other thing, of course, is earlier availability of employment authorization documents in the
Hmm.
permanent residence process. So once somebody is
Right.
here, um, exploring whether they're regulatory options or legal options
Right.
to have people maybe even as early as the I-140 category.
40,
I think
yeah.
right now a lot of the lawyers are saying that that's not viable. But given the pretty severe backlogs now,
Yeah.
especially with prevailing wage determinations at the Department of Labor,
Mm-hmm.
somebody might need to get creative because
Mm-hmm.
that's really delaying people being able to sort of get out on the line.
Right. And I know that there has been, for some I-140 visa holders, I think they are allowing a few types of visa categories to apply for EADs at the I-140 stage. And I think that's just a pilot. We'll see how far they can push that. That'll be tough for students, right? That'll be hard for F1 students, but necessity is the mother of all invention is the way I feel about a lot of this immigration stuff.
No. That's right. And in that regard, there are things that this particular leadership team at Homeland Security and this particular president have done
Hmm.
that sort of it recognizes that reality. I mean,
Hmm.
they may be slow,
Hmm.
but they have pivoted based on the circumstances around them. So hopefully, this is one of the circumstances that they will recognize as being a
Hmm.
pretty dire need, and
Hmm.
perhaps they take some action
I'm
there as well.
Now I'm going to put you on the spot on this one. So Leon Fresco and a few others were saying that what we really need to do is just make everyone current. That back in 2007, the Bush administration just made everyone current. They're like, you know what, screw it, everyone's current, file away. And then, of course, there was a huge backlog after that was done, but it did allow a substantial group of people to at least get in line. What do you think of this argument that the administration should just make everybody current? I know I've talked to people in the administration, who kind of laugh that out of my laugh in my face about that. But what are your thoughts on that as former
So
USCIS
look,
director?
anything Leon Fresco is a friend from way back. We're from the same hometown. And anything, and he's obviously one of the smartest people in the immigration world. And so anything he says needs to be heard and taken seriously.
Mhm.
So I'm going to give you the political answer instead. It's not going to happen. I think it's just what I've had enough conversations and kind of read the tea leaves enough to know that that's simply not going to happen.
Mhm, mhm. And do you think it's legal though? Like, is it something that I know that the administration is like, we'll never do it, but I mean, is it legal? Could they do that?
I think it's shaky, and the reason I think it's shaky is that the example to which many of the advocates for that um,
Hmm.
to which many of them point is that was actually, at least from the perspective of the folks in charge right now, was a mistake. It was something that
Hmm.
wasn't supposed to happen back in, I don't know, it was 2007, 2008, where
Hmm.
this was done, and then it was realized that it was wrong, and by that point it was too late.
Hmm.
Hearing it framed that way, which I've heard in
Hmm.
more than a few places, I'm still personally not seeing sort of the hard legal argument for taking that step.
Yeah, that makes sense. And going into 2024, we have an election going on. I'd like to get your perspective. If Biden gets reelected, what do you think would be his immigration priorities? Or if Trump gets the nomination and wins the White House, what do you think his immigration priorities will be?
Um, yeah, that's so it's interesting. Let's talk about the one that naturally I know better since
Hmm.
I was in the Obama administration. A lot of the people who I worked with are now
Hmm.
in charge. I think addressing the challenge of the long-term undocumented in the U.S.,
Hmm.
normalizing DACA populations. I think no matter what we say, I think that's going to still be the sort of the top
Hmm.
priority for a second Biden term. And Biden will be in his 80s. Guy's
Hmm.
got nothing to lose.
Hmm.
And so I think that that potentially can make them pretty bold in dealing with those, and in the process
Hmm.
of dealing with those, I think create opportunities in other immigration categories as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I think those will be. I think you're going to find that those combined with management of the border are still going to be
Hmm.
high priority. in a second Biden term.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot will also depend. We're in a particular economy right now. It's very
Right.
low unemployment. There's
Mm-hmm.
some indication that it might start ticking back up again, but we've been
Mm-hmm.
in low unemployment for a while
A
now.
while, yeah.
And
Yeah.
inflation is softening, and so it's a lot's going to depend on where the economy is, where the employment market is at
Mm-hmm.
the time that he gets elected. Trump is unpredictable.
To say the least.
He's going back to the we're going to deport everybody, and I think he says that. I think the reality is that the way they're going to govern, the way they governed the
Mm-hmm.
first time doesn't fully match the rhetoric. Although there were some
Mm-hmm.
things that were pretty significant that they did, but in reality, it didn't match the rhetoric. They did some modest increases in removal activity in the first administration. They didn't necessarily deport everybody who could be deported,
Right.
and so it's hard from what has been his campaign rhetoric so far to really know what exactly he will do. The combination of his campaign rhetoric and how he governed. What I can expect, because I know the people who will be in his sort of immigration cabinet, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
is I think there could be some further tightening of the employment-based immigration world, as there was
Mm-hmm.
in his
The last
first
one.
administration.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just if that's a precedent to look at, that is something
Yeah.
to be
Like the
watching.
944 is probably going to come back. The public charge stuff's going to come back. Probably the Muslim ban's going to come back. Some of those other things will probably
That's
be.
and an effort to pass employment-based regulations that are
Mhm.
more difficult than the ones we've seen.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, my theory is that if Biden gets reelected, or even like, what, this year, if the current USCIS director wants to take a break, work on the campaign, you should get back in there for a temporary stint as USCIS director. And don't forget
No,
us little people.
nobody's called me so far, but I obviously I would say that I have never turned down the call to serve. So
Perfect. Well, if they
we'll
call
see.
you,
But
you
right
have
now,
to serve.
nobody's knocking. Nobody's
No.
knocking on the door, and I'm
No,
very
if they
happy doing
do,
what I'm
and
doing.
if you become USS director, don't forget about us little people
Oh, I
in
won't.
the EB3
I won't.
unskilled world. And as you said, Biden is like 100 years old, so he can do whatever he wants at that age. So have at it.
Yep.
Exempt dependents, exempt everybody. Let's get things moving again. Well, thank you so much for your time here today. We'll have to do this again another time. And yeah, this is really, really helpful to helping our clients kind of understand the lay of immigration these days.
All right, Chris. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. We'll see you later, okay?
All right. Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.